Buried deep in the hills of eastern Washington keeps resurfacing, a bottomless pit said to be a pathway to the paranormal.
A drone flew into a mysterious hole called Mel's Hole and filmed something amazing that shouldn't be possible. This very deep hole in Washington seems to swallow up everything you throw into it. But here's the scary part. When someone threw a dead dog into the hole, they later saw the same dog walking around alive again.
There's a lot of weird stuff about this hole. Dogs are afraid of this hole. Animals are afraid of this hole. And he said, in fact, one of my neighbors once told me that his dog died and he threw the dog down the hole. And he said the next morning that dog was on his porch.
A man named Mel Waters kept looking into this mystery and found another weird hole in Nevada. In that hole, ice would vanish and animals that went in came back out, but they were changed somehow. Tune in, because what the drone sees will change everything you believe is real. The unbelievable truth behind Mel's Hole. There was a hole in the ground that people used like a garbage dump. They threw in old tires, broken chairs, and even dead animals. But no matter how much stuff went in, the hole never got full. This wasn't just any deep hole. Something felt very wrong about it. The air felt strange, radios didn't work right, and animals stayed far away. Even brave dogs would cry and refuse to go near it. The animals knew something bad was down there. One night, a stranger got too close and disappeared completely. The man who found the hole became obsessed with it. He wanted to know how deep it was. He tied a weight to a fishing line and kept lowering it down. He lowered it for a very long time, but it never hit the bottom. But the depth wasn't the scariest part. A neighbor told him a creepy story. The neighbor had thrown his dead dog into the hole. A few days later, he saw the same dog walking around alive. But the dog seemed different, like it knew things it shouldn't know. The man started talking about this on a late-night radio show that discussed weird mysteries.
As usual, I brought the dogs with me. They wouldn't go anywhere near the damn thing.
The story became very popular. Scientists, conspiracy believers, and government people all wanted to learn more. Then the government showed up. One morning he tried to visit his land, but found it blocked off. Military guards were there saying a plane had crashed. But there was no plane wreckage anywhere. Suddenly, he couldn't go on his own property. They offered him money to keep quiet and leave, but he said no. That's when things got worse. Then it got even stranger. Some people from Nevada contacted him. They had their own mysterious hole that their families had known about for many years. This hole was 9 feet wide with a metal edge that felt warm and soaked up all sound. When they dropped ice into it, something scary happened. Someone decided to test it with a living animal. They took a healthy sheep and lowered it into the hole. When it reached the same depth as the ice, a low humming sound started that gave everyone chills. They left the sheep down there for 30 minutes. When they pulled it back up, the sheep was dead. Not just dead. It looked cooked from the inside like it had been in a microwave. When they cut open the sheep, they found something disgusting. There was a huge tumor inside that seemed to be moving. When they cut into the tumor, a creature came out that no one could explain. It looked like a baby seal, but it had human eyes. The thing was covered in thick slime and smelled like the air after lightning strikes. Everyone stood there shocked, staring at this nightmare creature. It didn't attack or make noise. Instead, it seemed to understand them. Then it crawled to the edge of the hole and jumped back in. Just like that, it was gone. The hole wasn't just deep or bottomless. It was something else completely, like a tear in reality, a doorway to things people weren't supposed to see. It went against everything science could explain. People who got too close either disappeared, had their lives destroyed, or saw things that haunted them forever. This wasn't just a made-up story. Too many real things happened, and too many questions were never answered. The original property is now sealed off with heavy guards, and it's completely blacked out on satellite photos. But people haven't stopped looking, because if one hole like this exists, how many more might be out there waiting to be found? Even more disturbing, some people who got too close lost time. Hours or days would pass in what felt like moments. They saw shadows darker than anything natural, always moving away when they tried to look directly at them. There were rumors of missing people who were drawn to the unknown and never seen again. The man's obsession grew stronger. He researched old stories and legends from around the world about bottomless pits, gateways to hell, doorways to forgotten worlds. Ancient civilizations had warned against them, building stone circles and sacred markers to keep foolish people away. But the more he learned, the more dangerous it became. He was being watched. He got mysterious phone calls and warnings that he ignored. Then, just as suddenly as he had appeared in the story, he vanished. His last contact was a puzzling message to a close friend with coordinates that led to an empty desert. There was no sign of a fight, no clue where he went. Just silence. He thought he understood what was happening. He was wrong. Some places don't just exist. They take people. The pit that devours everything. By the time his story made its way onto the airwaves, the radio host was quick to slap a warning on it. Sure, you could go out there, try to find this mysterious place, but don't. Just don't. Because if you did, you might not come back, or worse, come back different. The way they described it, this wasn't just some hole in the ground. It was something way beyond human understanding, and messing with it could lead to some serious consequences. A few months later, Mel was back on the Coast to Coast show, this time with even wilder tales. Apparently, some folks had started messing around with this weird kind of ice that burned but never melted. Sounds insane, right? Well, a guy from Basque decided to bring some of this freaky fire ice into his cabin to keep warm. Bad move. Things got weird fast. The ice didn't just sit there and glow. It sucked all the moisture out of the air, drying out everything like some kind of supernatural dehumidifier from hell. The poor guy couldn't catch a break. His skin cracked, he was constantly thirsty, and even boiling water was a disaster. Steam would rise up, but then get yanked back down into the flames like it was being devoured. And despite all these obvious red flags, he kept using it. Because why not? Of course, this stupidity came back to bite him. The intense heat from this never-ending ice fire started wrecking the place, eating through the stove, the floor, and eventually the entire cabin. When the guy left and came back a month later, he found nothing but a deep, smooth pit where his home used to be. And sitting at the bottom of that pit, the damn stove, like it had just sunk straight down into oblivion. At this point, people started thinking the wilderness of Nevada was hiding some serious unknown forces. The stove hole was just the beginning. Every attempt to explain how it formed only led to more questions. Some guys tried to drag the stove out using brute force. No luck. It took a full-blown crane to lift it out. Even then, the hole it left behind kept drawing attention from those lucky or unlucky enough to know about it. The longer people spent near this mystery ice, the clearer it became that it was some unnatural force that humanity was never meant to mess with. The locals, the Basque, had their own ideas. They were convinced that this was all tied to the strange seal-like creature that Mel encountered, something ancient, mystical, and not entirely friendly. And then, things got even crazier. The Basque claimed that they had been contacted by the seal, not in some magical, glowing prophecy kind of way. Nope, this thing was straight up beeping and clicking at them through the radio. like a ghostly Morse code warning them about the dangers of this burning ice. Naturally, people had a hard time believing them, but they swore up and down that they had recordings. Art Bell, the radio host, wasn't about to let that slide. If they had evidence, he wanted it. He pushed Mel to bring proof, pictures, videos, anything. The public was ready for the big reveal. And just when it seemed like Mel was about to step forward with all the receipts, he disappeared. Vanished just like that. No calls, no messages, nothing. He ghosted everyone, and the timing was way too convenient. The skeptics had a field day. Of course he disappeared right when he had to back up his wild claims. The believers, though, they had their own theories. Maybe he got too close to the truth. Maybe the government was involved. Maybe that hole had swallowed him whole. Years passed. People kept digging into Mel's story, literally and figuratively. They scoured satellite images, trying to find any hint of this impossible pit. And at one point, someone thought they had cracked the code. They tracked down a location that matched Mel's description, a property with 2 old buildings. One collapsed, and right in the middle, a hole. Excitement skyrocketed. Was this it? Had they found Mel's hole? Nope. Just an old well. One that you could see the bottom of, clear as day. The letdown was brutal. Despite the dead ends, the legend of Mel's hole refused to die. Even with zero solid proof, the sheer absurdity of the tale kept people hooked. Maybe it was the idea of an endless pit, the mysterious creature, or the burning ice. It was all just too weird to ignore. People are drawn to the unexplained, the mysteries they can't quite solve. And as long as Mel's story lingers in the air, people will keep chasing it, hoping that one day they'll find the truth buried somewhere in the Nevada dirt. Then in 2017, a group of adventurers decided to take things into their own hands. Armed with GoPro cameras and high-powered lights, they set out to find the infamous hole using whatever online clues they could scrape together. What they found was a massive pit that seemed bottomless. They tossed rocks in, waiting to hear them hit the bottom, but silence. And then a creeping feeling set in. Someone, or something, was watching them. The moment got too intense, and they bailed before they could even check their footage. And just as they left, they saw a beetle tumble into the pit, a tiny insignificant little bug, swallowed by the unknown. The perfect metaphor for every single person still obsessed with Mel's hole. Real or fake? That's the question. Could this pit actually exist? Or is it just another tall tale that refuses to die? Maybe it's just the thrill of the mystery that keeps it alive. Or maybe, just maybe, there's something out there in the Nevada desert waiting for the next fool to stumble too close. Some answers aren't worth finding. The deeper they went, the worse it got. The descent that changed everything. All right, let's talk about this nightmare of a pit, Mel's hole. The so-called bottomless abyss that got everyone from internet conspiracy nuts to so-called researchers foaming at the mouth. People have been obsessed with it for years, whispering all kinds of ridiculous stories, things like time slips, vanishing objects, and some seriously creepy energy that messes with everything that gets too close. But for all the big talk, no one had ever really seen what was at the bottom. Every gadget sent down either glitched out or straight up died. And anyone dumb enough to get too close would walk away feeling sick, woozy, or just plain off. It was like the hole didn't want to be understood. But of course, humans being humans, that just made them want to push harder. Enter this group of so-called independent researchers. That's just a fancy way of saying a bunch of nerds with too much money and no government oversight. They were sick of hearing the rumors and wanted to see for themselves. Armed with a drone loaded with high-tech cameras, thermal imaging, and all kinds of fancy sensors, they were dead set on figuring out what was really down there. This wasn't some flimsy department store drone either. This thing was built like a tank and programmed to handle extreme conditions. At least that's what they thought. They planned everything down to the smallest detail. No digital maps, no GPS, no phones, nothing that could get them tracked. They had reason to believe someone or something was keeping tabs on this hole. Over the years, people had reported seeing those classic, creepy, unmarked black vans circling the area, and every satellite image of the place seemed to either vanish or get mysteriously distorted. Whatever was down there, someone, maybe something, didn't want anyone getting too close. That only made them more determined. Finally, they reached the infamous hole. And let's be real, this thing wasn't just a hole. It was a perfectly smooth, impossibly dark void in the ground, like someone had cut into the earth with a cosmic knife. No jagged edges, no natural rock formations, just a seamless, yawning pit. The air felt thick, like walking into an invisible wall of pressure. Their watches immediately went haywire. Compasses spun in circles, and even their own bodies felt heavier, like gravity had a personal vendetta against them. But they weren't there to gawk. They were there to send the drone into the abyss. As soon as they launched it, things started getting weird. The walls of the hole weren't just smooth. They looked almost melted, like something had blasted them into shape. There was no logical reason for it. No normal erosion patterns, no cracks or jagged formations, just a perfect, artificial smoothness. Then the real weirdness began. About 300 feet down, the sensors went haywire. Temperatures shifted wildly, 1 second freezing, the next hotter than hell. The electromagnetic readings? They were off the charts, pulsing and shifting like something was alive down there. But that was just the start. Around 700 feet, the drone's camera picked up strange markings on the walls. Symbols that flickered in and out like they weren't really there. Like they existed in some in-between state. The patterns weren't random either. They had structure, precision, purpose. At first it was subtle, a shift in the shadows, a barely there blur against the smooth walls. But as the drone descended further, whatever was down there stopped hiding. The camera caught glimpses of it, a shape, dark and indistinct, moving against gravity like it didn't care about physics. The thing was almost impossible to focus on, like the lens itself refused to process its existence. It wasn't a trick of the light. Something was down there, something alive. At about 1,200 feet, the drone's camera locked onto something even more terrifying. A structure, a massive metallic shape embedded in the side of the hole. And it wasn't just big, it was impossibly huge, stretching beyond what the drone could capture. Its surface was eerily smooth, yet pulsed with an internal energy. It looked ancient, but untouched, like it had been waiting there for something. As the drone moved closer, the structure responded. A soft, rhythmic pulse of light flickered across its surface, matching the electromagnetic waves the sensors had been tracking earlier. It wasn't random. It wasn't a glitch. It was reacting to the drone's presence. And then, the eyes appeared. Not human, not animal, something else entirely. They glowed in the darkness, locked onto the drone like they could see straight through the camera, straight through the screen, straight through the people watching. Whatever this was, it knew it was being watched. Panic set in. The drone suddenly lost all control. The altitude reading plummeted, and the last frame recorded before everything went black was something massive, something moving, something that should not exist. Then, nothing. The drone was gone, swallowed by the pit, erased, as if it had never existed. A deep, gut-churning vibration that rolled out of the hole like a wave, shaking the ground, pressing into their bones. It wasn't just sound. It was something deeper, something that made their own bodies feel different. And then one of them, Dana, cried out. When she pulled up her sleeve, the same eerie symbols from the walls of the hole were now glowing under her skin, pulsing with the same rhythm as the hum. She wasn't in pain, but she wasn't the same either. That was it. They ran. They didn't bother packing up their gear, they just ran. But the hum followed them, stretching out like invisible tendrils, clinging to them long after they'd left the site. Days later, they went through the footage they had managed to salvage. Most of it was corrupted, scrambled by whatever force had erased their drone. But a few images remained. Blurry glimpses of the symbols, the eyes, the structure. And one final chilling frame. A massive, intricate design at the bottom of the hole. It wasn't random. They could never go back. Whatever was down there had let them leave. This time. But they had seen too much. And the worst part? The feeling that somewhere deep in the void, something had seen them too. And it was waiting. Was Mel's Hole really a bottomless pit, a gateway to another realm? Or just a well-crafted hoax? Let me know what you think in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more mind-bending mysteries.